Chapter 332. Before she could finish her words, the man gently pulled her into his arms. The words that were on the tip of her tongue were swallowed back into her stomach along with the man's action. The man was not wearing any clothes, and she was wet all over. The feeling of their bodies pressed against each other was clearly what she had experienced with Mo Wu Shang the day before yesterday, with the throbbing of the first time. Maybe this matter was not taken into consideration. I did not expect that in the eyes of Gui Fei, it would be considered as deliberate. In her ears, she heard the man's low laugh and helpless voice. His big palm gently stroked her hair bun and said with a smile, "Since General Shan is seriously ill, then Zhan will replace someone else. Is Gui Fei satisfied?" Shun Yueji did not speak, but it was not difficult for the man to see that she was still angry from the wrinkled little face. Feng Juqing took a look, and his black eyes flashed. This matter, Zhen really did not deliberately vent the anger for the Empress, but Zhen did not consider it carefully. It is also because Zhen values your father too much that I subconsciously thought of your father when the soldiers of Nanyue Mountain caused trouble. After saying this, he got up from the bathtub. Shin Yueji was shocked. She had just turned around, but she subconsciously turned her back to him. Seeing her reaction, the man chuckled, and his voice was sweet and gentle, extremely doting. "Gui Fei, are you not waiting for Zhen to dress? This concubine has taken the clothes for your majesty. It is just behind the screen. Your majesty can easily grab it." Shin Yueji climbed out of the bathtub in a panic and ran out. Feng Juqing looked at her panicked figure running out, his eyebrows wrinkled, but in the end, he did not say anything. "Your Majesty." Seeing Shin Yueji push the door open and leave, Qiu Yang came in respectfully. Feng Juqing's hand that was wearing the clothes paused and slowed down. Has Kong Yin been settled?" "Yes, it has been settled. Just waiting for your Majesty to return to the palace. I will not go back today. I will temporarily stay in the general's mansion for the night and return to the palace tomorrow." "Didn't you say that you will return to the capital today?" Qiu Yang looked puzzled, and when he met the emperor's gaze, he quickly lowered his head. "Yes. The letter that Zhen wrote to General Shen arrived yesterday, and today, General Shen is seriously ill." He chewed on the words carefully and chuckled softly. The emperor suspected that he didn't want to go to the South City, so he came up with the idea of pretending to be sick, just to. Feng Juqing shook his head. This method is too deliberate. It doesn't seem like something he would do. Moreover, going to the southern city to fight was a good thing for the people. Everyone could reject it, but not Shun He. Looks like we really don't need him this time. He recalled Shun Yueji's mournful and sarcastic gaze before she left. Suddenly, he lost interest. Were all the women in this world the same? His jade-like hand landed on the coffee table. The man poured a cup of tea and sipped it gracefully. She had thought that the eldest daughter of the Shun family was different from the other women in the harem. He knew his limits and knew how to be patient. She should be as sensible as Gu Yueqin and Yin Er. And just now, he frowned. At this moment, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. This was the kind of woman he wanted. She thought he was doing it for her. But when Shin Yueji really thought so, he felt that this woman was too boring. Then, Qiu Yang was hesitant and carefully probed. "The soldiers of Southern Mountain really need to be punished. Who does your Majesty plan to send?" Hearing this, Feng Juqing looked at him lightly and muttered for a moment. "Senli Yuan." Chapter 333. Afternoon. Shin Yueji accompanied the man who had eaten to enjoy the scenery in the back garden. At the corner of the corridor, the man suddenly stopped her. Shin Yueji looked back at him. "Emperor, what's wrong?" Feng Juqing walked in front of her, stretched out his long arm and took her into his arms. Shin Yueji pushed a few times, but did not push him away. Her eyes did not deliberately look at him. "There is no one here. Emperor does not need to be so close to this concubine to reassure father." "Are you still angry about General Shun's matter?" "This concubine does not dare. Emperor is the ruler and father is the subject. What does Emperor want our Shin family to do? It's just a matter of a word. If father is not ill, I am afraid that no matter how dangerous the matter in Nanqing is, father will go there without stopping." Jin has ordered Qiu Yang to write a letter and Senli Yuan. Speaking of this, he looked down at her, You should be familiar with Li Yuan. He is a confidant of Gu family. Being stared at so directly, as if he could see through her mind, Xin Yueji's face changed slightly and did not want to look at him. Why does Emperor say this to this concubine? Her chin was lifted. Xin Yueji was forced to look at the man's gentle eyes. Gu Fei suspects that Zhan is deliberately biased towards Gu family. This time, Zhan sent Li Yuan. Will you still say that Zhan is biased? Xin Yueji chuckled. Although official Li's martial arts are high, he is not an ignorant boorish fellow who only knows how to fight and kill. In terms of brains, he is much better than father. The emperor sending him is clearly giving him a chance to gain merit. Hearing what she said, Feng Juqing felt a headache coming on. He looked at her helplessly. I sent your father there, and you said that I was deliberately biased towards the Gu clan. Now, I sent the Gu clan there, and you said that I was deliberately giving them a chance. My love. His lips were slightly raised and he looked at her carefully. In your eyes, do you think Zhan is wrong? Xin Yueji snorted. This concubine does not dare. Everything the emperor does is right. This concubine does not dare to talk about the emperor. Why do Zhen clearly feel that Gu Fei is deliberately finding fault with Zhen? Xin Yueji could not move as her chin was buckled. She watched the man approach her, and his warm breath sprayed on her face. When she was Gu Yueqin, this man had never been so intimate with her. Her small face slightly twitched as she reluctantly said, This concubine has been spoiled by father and mother since I was young. The emperor said that he wouldn't bother with this concubine. Bang! Suddenly, a sound came from behind him. Xin Yueji took the opportunity to break free from the man's embrace. She looked at the maid who had deliberately tried to seduce her but was exposed. She scolded her sternly, What's wrong with you? Li Yingying was so frightened that she hurriedly knelt on the ground. Nyang, Nyang, please forgive me. I am. It's you? Xin Yueji glanced at her and said unhappily, I bought you because you were homeless on the streets and pitiful. I didn't expect him to be so clumsy. He doesn't even know how to look at the situation. After scolding her for a while, Xin Yueji pulled on the man's sleeve. Your Majesty, let's go over there. Don't let this unruly maidservant ruin our mood. She tugged at him, but he didn't move. She pulled him a second time, but the man still didn't move. His eyes stared at the trembling woman who was kneeling on the ground. Xin Yueji was displeased. She boldly pulled him again, and even her tone had a layer of anger. Your Majesty. Chapter 334. It was as if something weird was stuffed into his heart, and a strange feeling spread all over his body. He didn't look at the anger on Xin Yueji's face. Instead, he looked at the familiar face of the woman in white and her timid expression. Who is she? If one listened carefully, one could hear a slight tremble in his voice that had always been gentle and calm. Even he himself hadn't noticed this. She's the servant girl that I bought the day before yesterday. In Feng Juqing's memory, she and Gu Yueqin had never met before. If they had met when they were young, they should have changed after they grew up. Even in the capital city, they might bump into each other occasionally. At that time, Xin Yueji was surrounded by people. It could be said that Gu Yueqin had seen Xin Yueji before, but Xin Yueji rarely saw her. Except for the last time when she was drowned in the lake, she was badly mutilated, and no one could tell what she looked like. I'll take my leave. Li Yingying didn't dare to stay here for long. Her thin body was trembling. She crawled up from the ground in embarrassment and walked past Feng Juqing. But the moment she took a step forward, the man grabbed her wrist. He was so strong that she frowned. Her face was pale, and her body was trembling violently. The man in front of her was the ruler of Feng country. He had handsome facial features and an incomparably gentle temperament. When he looked at people with his clear eyes, there would always be some warmth. There was no woman in this world who wouldn't be moved by such an outstanding man. Even Li Yingying couldn't avoid the fact that the emperor of Feng country was so handsome that it was indescribable. Qin. He opened his mouth and spat out the word, but his head hurt as if it was being torn apart. He suddenly let go. Li Yingying was shocked. She had a chance to escape, so she left in a hurry without looking back. Feng Juqing covered his head. His face was as white as a piece of paper, which was very scary. There was a thick layer of blood at the bottom of his dark eyes. It was as if blood would burst out from the bottom of his eyes. He staggered a few steps back as if he couldn't stand steadily. Shin Yueji was shocked. She thought that Feng Jiuqing would have some reaction when she saw her ex-fiancé standing in front of her, even if it wasn't in front of her. But today's reaction seemed to be a little too big. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Shin Yueji couldn't be bothered to argue with him about Li Yingying. She sensed that something was wrong and quickly went forward to support him. The moment the man raised his eyes to look at her, countless blood vessels gathered in his eyes, forming a river. The darkness was wrapped in blood vessels, and in that river of blood, she saw herself dyed red by blood. Emperor. The man's grip on her wrist was very tight. For example, when he was holding Li Yingying, it was even tighter. He seemed to have used all the strength he had in his life. Shin Yueji felt the pain and instinctively wanted to struggle. In an instant, the man seemed to have lost all his strength again. His entire body fell towards her powerlessly. Shin Yueji looked at the man who had fallen on her shoulder, and her eyes flashed with astonishment. Feng Jiuqing. What happened to him? She hurriedly pulled the man so that he did not fall to the ground. Chapter 335. He took Feng Jiuqing from her hand and said, Imperial concubine Shen, give his majesty to me. Shin Yueji did not speak any nonsense and allowed him to take Feng Jiuqing away. Halfway through, she saw that the man stopped in his tracks and did not turn his head back. He spoke in a low voice. This subordinate hopes that Shan Guifei will be able to keep this matter a secret. What's wrong with his majesty? Did he really have such a big reaction when he saw Li Yingying? She didn't believe it herself. Maybe his majesty has been overworked these days and is not feeling well. I'll take his majesty to rest. Do you need a doctor? Qiu Yang frowned. No need. Shin Yueji didn't tell anyone about Feng Jiuqing's fainting, but went to Shan Yueji's residence. Seeing him lying on the bed pretending to be sick, his pale face was even worse than Shan He's. If Shan He was playing the role of a sickly old man, then Shen Yueji was playing the role of a dead person. Shuangshi was serving him. Seeing her coming, he quickly got up to make room for her. Miss, you're here? Where's his majesty? Don't pretend. People just pretend to be good. You're too good. You even need someone to feed you. Shuangshi, go out and keep watch. I have something to say to Big Brother. Yes, miss, I'll go out and keep watch. What's wrong? Seeing the seriousness on her face, Shen Yueji sat up from the bed. Did you arrange for Li Yingying to meet him? Yes. Shin Yueji replied lightly. I planned to arrange it after entering the palace, but I suddenly changed my mind. How did his majesty react? I'm not sure. Shin Yueji sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about Feng Jiuqing's reaction. His face was as calm as usual, but his mood seemed to fluctuate. Before I could observe him carefully, he fainted. Fainted? Shen Yueji opened his mouth. Why so excited? Jeer. If his majesty loved the former empress. If his majesty loved the former empress, he wouldn't have let her die. Don't forget that it was the order of the emperor himself to sink the lake. Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows. Moreover, there is a woman hidden in the emperor's imperial study. He clearly already has someone in his heart. There's a woman hiding in the emperor's imperial study? Shin Yueji was shocked. The imperial study was an important place for the civil and military officials to discuss state affairs with the emperor. How could there be a woman there? Seeing his expression, Shin Yueji knew what he was thinking. That's why I said that woman is very important to the emperor. That's why he locked her up in such an important secret room like the imperial study. And as far as I know, even Gu Yuan pales in comparison to that woman. He spends most of his time, and sometimes even his nights, in the imperial study. What a waste. I thought he cared a lot about politics. Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows. Last time in the palace, the emperor also faintly had a headache. Big brother, do you think that the emperor has an incurable disease? Can't he be agitated? The corner of the man's mouth twitched. What incurable disease can't be sent to the imperial physician? If the emperor is not feeling well, he would have looked everywhere for a divine doctor. If the imperial physician in the palace doesn't work, he would have looked for one outside. Since the emperor ascended the throne, have you seen him look for an imperial physician? Chapter 336. Somehow, hearing Shinyuechi's words, Shinyueji almost subconsciously thought of what Xiaoyang said to her in the garden, forbidding her to tell others about it. You seem to have a deep prejudice against the emperor. What? Why do I feel that you are talking about a stranger when you mention the emperor? She met Shinyuechi's smiling eyes. The man grinned, but it's different for the regent. You give me the feeling that you don't want to rely on the emperor, but you force yourself to rely on him. But the regent, you obviously want to refuse him, but you can't help but want to rely on him. Shinyuechi seemed to be unruly, but in fact, he knew it very well. The more unruly a person was, the clearer he was. Shinyueji was not afraid of being seen through by him at all. You're right. I do like the regent, but not the emperor. Seeing her admit it so quickly, Shinyuechi quickly frowned. Then why did you go to the palace? If you didn't go to the palace, you and the regent might have been married by now. Because I just don't like the fact that the emperor killed his wife of 9 years. He doesn't care about old affection at all. How can such a cruel man be a good emperor of Feng country if he doesn't care about his wife and children? He watched his sister grow up, and what she loved to do most was to fight for justice. Shinyuechi listened to her words with a headache. So you went to the palace to find trouble with the emperor? Not all. Half of it is because of the Gu family. Our Shun family doesn't have a woman to deal with in the palace. Isn't it a loss? Our Shin family has done a lot for Feng country. If the emperor listened to women, he won't be able to sit on the throne for long. If the dog emperor listened to the pillow talk of a woman, then he won't be able to sit on this dragon throne for long. He won't listen to women, but he won't believe men either. Shinyueji didn't want to talk with him anymore. She got up from the bed. Forget it. Have a good rest. I won't get anything from you. No. Shinyuechi looked up at her. You didn't come to see me at all? Do you need me to remind you whether you are really sick or not? Shinyuechi rolled on the bed bitterly. You have a change of heart. You weren't like this before. In the past, when Big Brother was sick, you were the one who served me tea and water. Really? Shinyueji looked at him with a sneer. When I was sick before, did you throw insects and flies into my medicine bowl? This sentence made Shinyuechi speechless. He climbed up from the bed and sat up straight. Your Majesty's thoughts are too meticulous. Although I don't have much contact with him, he is still a difficult character to deal with. If you want to mess around, you can. Father, Mother, and I will protect you. But don't go overboard. You have to remember that he is the emperor. If something happens to him, what will happen to the people of Feng Nation? Shinyuechi looked at her with rare maturity. Because you're my sister, I won't complain about anything you ask me to do, even if it's about Li Yingying. But when it comes to being an emperor, no man in this world can be as good as Feng Juqing. In Big Brother's eyes, Feng Juqing is a good emperor, right? Chapter 337. He was devoted to the people and the world. The former Feng country was devastated by the previous emperor. A small country could destroy it. The people lost their homes. They burned, killed, and plundered. He raised his head. If it wasn't for Feng Juqing, there wouldn't be the Feng country today. There wouldn't be a peaceful life for the people. In front of a man, his ambition is far higher than a woman's. Even if it's 100 years or 1,000 years, it's nothing in front of power, let alone 9 years of love. A woman can exchange the world's peace, the people's health, and countless lives. Do you think it's worth it? Big Brother, do you think so too? Shinyuechi was silent for a while. He raised his head and looked at her solemnly. He didn't speak. Shinyuechi threw a tea set at him and hit him on the head. Shinyuechi wailed and rolled on the bed while holding his head. Ouch! Did Gu Yueqin betray the country or become a demon concubine of the Feng country? She didn't do anything wrong. When she's alive, Feng Juqing is the emperor. When she's dead, Feng Juqing is still the emperor. Is there any conflict? If she had done something wrong in the past, Shinyuechi's words might have caused some ripples in her heart. But the problem was that she used to be so well-behaved, virtuous, and kind. Even when she saw an old lady fall on the road, she would step forward to help her up. How could her death bring peace and prosperity to the country? How treacherous had she been when she was alive? This damned Shinyuechi. The more Shinyueji thought about it, the angrier she got. She walked over, picked up a pillow, and smashed it on his head. Shinyuechi was hiding under the quilt. The pillow was hard, and hitting him was like throwing a rock at him. Little sister, be gentle. It hurts. Ouch. Tell me, what did Guyuechin do wrong? Shinyuechi covered her head and hid in the corner of the bed, looking at her pitifully. She really didn't do anything wrong, but it doesn't mean that if she didn't do anything wrong, she will? What will she do? She can only blame her poor birth. If she was born into a better family, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Her birth determines how far she can go in the future. She was destined to die so soon. Is there anything wrong with her birth? Shinyueji threw another pillow at him. Of course. If she had been born in our Shin family, I'm afraid she would still be alive and well. The man's last words made Shinyueji's movements pause, and she immediately threw the pillow aside. Shinyueji thought that she had calmed down. She rubbed her head and crawled out of the brocade quilt. Little sister, this is the fate of women from official families. Those who are useless are just stepping stones, and those who are useful can be arrogant to the end. Guyuane is a good example. Just because she's kind doesn't mean that she should live a good life. You have to remember that good people usually have short lives. Only evil people have long lives. I thought Big Brother was different from other men, but now, hearing these words from his mouth, Shinyueji couldn't describe how she felt in her heart. She got up faintly. You have a good rest first. I will go see the Emperor. Chapter 338. Jilan Courtyard. The man had already woken up. He was sitting on the soft bed with his eyes closed. Perhaps he was too focused that he didn't even notice Shinyueji walking over. Shinyueji poured a cup of tea and handed it to him. Shinyueji's voice was faint. Your Majesty, you're awake? Hearing this, the man opened his eyes. His moist eyes stared at her for a while. He smiled and took the tea she handed him, and, watching him drink the tea elegantly, Shinyueji sat on the round chair opposite him. Your Majesty, today, what's the name of that maidservant? Startled, Shinyueji looked down. Li Yingying, Li Yingying. The man murmured these three words. Guifei, do you plan to bring her into the palace? Shinyueji frowned. I don't have that plan. Why did your Majesty suddenly ask about her? The man chuckled, then raised his head and looked at her. Guifei, don't you think that she looks like someone? The former empress? Shinyueji saw the man suddenly frown. Shinyueji smiled. This concubine has never seen the former empress, but I heard the people in the mansion say that she looks very similar to the former empress. When I saved her, I didn't know, but since she has been saved, I can't kill her again, right? Feng Juqing played with the tea set in his hand. After a long time, she heard him say slowly, Guifei, Jin knows that you have always been smart. This concubine is stupid. I don't know what your Majesty is talking about. The man's pair of light and gentle eyes slightly narrowed. The gentle lips no longer had the slightest hint of a smile, a pair of gentle eyes like a sharp blade. When Shinyueji looked over, he suddenly stood up. Her neck was held in the man's palm. With a little force, her neck could be broken. Facing the man's eyes with some hatred, Shinyueji's face showed no fear. What's wrong with your Majesty? Just because this concubine found a woman who looks a little like the former empress, you hate this concubine so much? Jin said, no one is allowed to mention anything about Guyuechin. Imperial consort, are you turning a deaf ear to my words? With both hands holding onto the man's large hands, Shinyueji had a chance to catch her breath. She smiled slightly. This concubine doesn't dare. This concubine has already said that when I saved her, I didn't know she was the late empress. Now that I saved her, the emperor has always been benevolent. Could it be that you really can't tolerate an innocent woman? To Shinyueji, this man was undoubtedly not a stranger. The gentle and elegant man of the past was now like a demon from hell. His gaze was ice-cold, his gaze like a torch, and his lips were like a blade, itching to tear her apart. It was as if he was a completely different person from before. She saw that the man's black eyes had turned red, a frightening red like that of a wild beast. She finally realized that something was wrong. At this moment, the man seemed to really want to kill her. Shin Yueji began to struggle under his palm. Feng Juqing gradually tightened his grip. Seeing that her face had turned red from suffocation, endless hatred shot out from the depths of his eyes. He was shocked, and the redness in his eyes slowly faded, returning to normal. He let go of his hand, and his head felt like it was exploding again. He covered his head, turned his back, and put his hand on the tea table beside him. He barely stood up. "Get out." Shin Yueji touched the pain in her neck and saw the man's embarrassed figure. Chapter 339. Ba. Outside the door, Kong Yin seemed to be a little surprised when he saw her come out, but he still bowed his head and said Buddha's words. The mark on her neck was bright and dazzling, which made Kong Yin notice it. His pupils deepened a little. "Are you the guest brought back by the emperor?" Feng Juqing brought back a monk who lived in the mansion. Shin Yueji had already heard about this. She didn't expect to see him outside her door. Kong Yin smiled slightly. "Yes, I am." Shin Yueji looked at him up and down. "You are a monk. Did the emperor leave the capital for so many days just to pick you up?" "The emperor's mind is not clear now. It's better not to disturb him. Please." "Of course I know his mind is not clear. Otherwise, he would not suddenly want to kill me." Feng Juqing's behavior today was unexpected, but Shin Yueji was not surprised at all. She used to know too little about him. Now, she slowly learned some unknown things about him. She walked past Kong Yin and turned to leave alone. But after a few steps, she found that the monk behind her was following her. She didn't speak, so Kong Yin continued to follow her. After a few steps, they came to a corner. Shin Yueji turned back and looked at him. "Master, do you have something to say to me? I have been a monk for 20 years. 70% to Buddha and 30% to my heart." "Oh." Shin Yueji looked at him. "Master, you don't want to be a monk?" Kong Yin smiled. "If it wasn't because my career was not smooth, why would I become a monk in anger?" "So?" She narrowed her eyes. "You followed the emperor back to the capital this time. Do you plan to get an official position in the court?" Kong Yin didn't hide anything and said with a smile, "To be precise, it is true. Yes, an empty temple, guarding the Buddha every day, abandoning the mortal heart. People who are not monks don't understand the boredom under the mortal heart." Shin Yueji smiled faintly. "It is the emperor who can give you this honor." "Master, why do you follow me?" Imperial Consort Nyang is extremely quick-witted. This old monk wants to make a deal with you. "Oh, the emperor personally invited me to the court, which shows how much he values me." Shin Yueji narrowed her eyes slightly and waited for him to continue. "His Majesty is a meticulous person. He will never allow a person with high authority to gradually rise in power in the future." Shin Yueji didn't say anything. Instead, she looked at the so-called monk in front of her calmly. Without needing him to say anything, she could vaguely guess what he wanted to do. "The Grand Preceptor wishes to cooperate with me?" Kong Yin smiled. "To be precise, that is indeed the case. You haven't even entered the court as an official, yet you're already disloyal to the emperor." Chapter 340. A month ago, the late empress was drowned in the lake by the emperor. The monk's short sentence made Shin Yueji look at him abruptly. However, after a while, she retracted her gaze, and there was self-mockery in her smile. As expected of someone personally invited by the emperor. The matter regarding the late emperor and empress is a taboo for everyone in the Feng nation, yet you dare to bring it up again. "Your Highness, don't you want to know who the white-clothed lady in the imperial study is?" Shin Yueji was about to leave, but after hearing his words, she subconsciously stopped and turned to look at him. "You know about this? If not, why do you think the emperor values me so much? Who is it?" There was a short silence in the air. After a long while, he heard the woman's faint voice and asked. "The woman in the imperial study is currently in the possession of the empress." Kong Yin's words made Shin Yueji stare at him for a long time. She didn't move or say a word. They communicated silently. After about half an hour, Shin Yueji suddenly smiled. "Master is indeed a master. I offended you just now. You didn't disappoint me, Your Highness." She had guessed it, but she didn't pursue it like others. Instead, She chose to ignore it with a smile. Kong Yin was slightly surprised and impressed by the woman in front of him. All right, I agree to cooperate with you. However, even if I agree, if there is anything that I'm not satisfied with, or if it involves danger, I have the right to terminate the cooperation. Back then, I only had some achievements. Ordinary people can't suppress my power. Kong Yin looked at her and slowly said, the reason why this old monk sought out the imperial consort is because this old monk's enemy is the same as the imperial consort. Master Kong Yin was mediocre for so many years because you were suppressed by the Gu family? Kong Yin narrowed his eyes dangerously. His black eyes were no longer as calm as before. Instead, they were filled with faint hatred. He sneered and said with a ferocious expression, if not for Gu Wei, I might have achieved something in the imperial court, but you have to thank Prime Minister Gu, right? Hearing this, Kong Yin looked at her in confusion. If not for Prime Minister Gu, how could you accompany the Buddha for so many years, comprehending so many truths? In this world, there are some things that exist if you believe them, and they don't exist if you don't. You dedicated so many years of your youth to Buddha, so how could Buddha not give you something in return? After listening to Shun Yueji's words, Kong Yin suddenly laughed. Your Highness is right. This old monk is indeed different from ordinary people. I can see through a person's thoughts and calculate their fate. Why did you seek me out? Shun Yueji chuckled as she looked at the old and gentle face in the sky. Since Great Master is already so strong, why do you still need to look for me? Tell me all of this? Aren't you afraid that this consort will tell the Emperor about your disloyalty? This old monk believes that Imperial Consort Nyang won't. The reason why I was able to find Imperial Consort Nyang is because this old monk has the same goal as Imperial Consort Nyang. Saying all this to your ladyship is only to prove to your ladyship that this old monk is loyal to your ladyship, and these are the sincerity this old monk has brought to your ladyship. Sincerity? Chapter 341. That's why you came to me, right? Compared to the Emperor, your backer is indeed stronger. However, he is a man who only believes in himself and has doubts in his heart. He should be your biggest enemy. Do you think I'm right, Master? Indeed. When I was in Kongyin Temple, I asked the Emperor about it. He asked me to help him get rid of the Gu and Shin families. Then, I can replace them. Everyone in Feng Country knows how loyal the Gu and Shun families are to His Majesty. Even His Majesty doesn't trust these two loyal officials, let alone this old monk. Kong Yin smiled faintly. Compared to Lord Gu and Lord Shun, this old monk understands much more. Although His Majesty has promised this old monk at most 3 years, according to His Majesty's character, if this old monk does not think of a way to escape within 3 years, I'm afraid that my fate will be 100 times more miserable than that of the Gu and Shun families. 1 year is not enough for me to fulfill my long-cherished wish. That's why I came to you, Your Highness. The monk's words gave Shin Yueji a vague answer in her heart. After staring at him for a while, Shin Yueji glanced around and said with a faint smile, if Feng Juqing found out that the Grandmaster he went through so much trouble to invite is now plotting a rebellion with his concubine, I wonder how he would feel. Compared to the hatred of killing his wife and children, even if it's a rebellion, I'm sure the concubine will add fuel to the fire secretly instead of exposing it, right? Master, do you know why I've been hesitating these days? Shin Yueji smiled coldly in her heart when she saw that he didn't speak. On the surface, she seemed to be mysterious, but in fact, she didn't know much. She hesitated for a few steps and said, because I know he's a good emperor. You abandoned the millions of innocent people of the Phoenix Kingdom just because of your personal grudges. Shin Yueji looked at him and smiled faintly. Of course, I'm not that righteous, and I'm not that cruel either. Indeed, other people don't matter to me. Even when I sank into the lake that day, there were still many people who insulted me and threw dirty things at me. However, among the many people who insulted me, there were a few who cried for me in secret. She took a few steps forward. It is because of these few people that I am hesitating. Ba. Before she could finish speaking, Kong Yin interrupted her. A man who killed his wife and son with his own hands. How much sincerity does the imperial consort think he has towards his own people? After being husband and wife for 9 years, imperial consort's understanding of his majesty is merely this. Shin Yueji lowered her head. You're right. Only now do I realize that my understanding of him isn't just a tiny bit. It's simply a drop in the ocean, not even worth mentioning. She recalled the way he looked at her in the room just now, and the bloodthirsty coldness in his eyes. For a split second, she knew that he wanted to kill her. The secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. This is all I can say. The imperial consort is a kind-hearted person. This old monk is very gratified that she can understand who deserves to die and who is innocent after experiencing all these things. However, to achieve great things, there must be sacrifices. If imperial consort continues to hesitate, then the previous life scene will repeat itself. Aren't you monks supposed to be merciful? Chapter 342. After Kongyin left, Shin Yueji stayed in the same place for a long time. The words that Kongyin said before he left kept echoing in her ears. His Majesty is sometimes in love with you, and sometimes he is heartless. All this is just because of the power. What is Her Majesty looking forward to? Perhaps the deep feelings that your ladyship had for His Majesty had already disappeared with the death of your previous life. You are just unreconciled that His Majesty's 9 years of deep love for you, in the end, was just a play. Shin Yueji knew that Kongyin was still hiding something in her heart, but he didn't want to say it, and she didn't want to ask more. He was right. She had no feelings for Feng Jiuqing, otherwise, she wouldn't refuse Imo Wushang's kindness and lingering feelings for her. She just couldn't accept it. She couldn't accept that he'd hurt and destroyed her for Guyuan. She couldn't accept that their 9 years of deep love had all been a farce. Yes, she clenched her fists. Anyone could be the emperor, but not Feng Jiuqing, a man who could kill his wife cruelly and dig out his unborn child's flesh and blood. How much sincerity could he have towards the common people? He even wanted to get rid of the loyal officials of the Shin family who were willing to sacrifice their lives for him. If the Shin family were to fall from power, then wouldn't her end be the same as her own? Mississippi, why are you here? Shuangshi's voice came from behind. Perhaps Shin Yueji was thinking too seriously. She didn't see her until she ran to her side. Glancing at her lightly, Shin Yueji calmed down and asked, "What's wrong?" "Young Master Shangguan is here." "Shangguan you?" "Yes, he heard that Miss is going back to the palace tomorrow, so he came to say goodbye to Mississippi. I think he really came to say goodbye to Miss today." "Miss, do you want to see him?" "If Miss is not willing to see him, I will send him away now." Rubbing her eyebrows, Shin Yueji shook her head and said, "Forget it. I'll see him." Shuangshi looked at her in disbelief and finally nodded. "Okay, then I will let him in. By the way, Miss, is His Majesty in your room?" After all, His Majesty is the first wife. Don't let His Majesty see her. Otherwise, it will be hard for you to explain to His Majesty. You know, this is the taboo for His Majesty. "It doesn't matter. He doesn't have the time to care about me right now." Shun Yueji replied faintly and walked past her, intending to leave. "You are not allowed to go." The man's cold words revealed the master's dissatisfaction and suppressed anger. Hearing this familiar voice, Shun Yueji suddenly turned around. Indeed, she saw Imo Wushang's handsome and ugly face staring coldly at her with his pitch-black eyes. At that moment, his heart was filled with an indescribable feeling. Shin Yueji stared at him for a long time. In the end, the words that came out of her mouth were actually a few resentful words. "You're being mean to me?" Imo Wushang was startled and annoyance flashed across his handsome face. He went forward to hold her hand. "Be good, I'm on my own." Shin Yueji put her hands behind her back and did not look at him. In an instant, the expression on the man's face became gloomy. From the incident in the Prince Regent's mansion yesterday to now, she had ignored him. In the end, she did not have him in her heart. If she had him, even if she believed him, she should not have acted as if nothing had happened. Chapter 343. He didn't know what she was thinking, but he still wanted to explain it to her. Yesterday, I don't know what happened, that woman. I know. Before he finished, Shin Yueji interrupted him. How could your taste be so low as to fall for that woman? Shin Yueji took another step back, and so did Double Happiness. From time to time, they would look at the door of Jilan's courtyard. Well, master, the emperor is in Mrs. Room. What she was afraid of now was that the door of Jilan's courtyard would be opened from the inside, and the first wife would meet the adulterer. Although it was exciting, it couldn't be too exciting. Not only was Shuangxi worried, but Shun Yueji's heart was also beating fast, wishing that it could jump out of her throat. She wasn't afraid of Feng Juqing seeing it, but the look of the man in front of her. Why did you come to see me? Didn't I tell you not to come today? I miss you. Two simple and straightforward words, and the man's gaze was directed at her. Shin Yueji subconsciously looked away, and her voice was a little hoarse. I know, but after all, the emperor is here. If he finds out, I won't be able to explain. Imo Wushang took a step forward. He was not the kind of person who was afraid of things. If he wanted to see the person he liked, not to mention the emperor, even the emperor couldn't stop him. If it wasn't for her repeated considerations, he would have endured. Jier, he took a step forward, wanting to hold her in his arms. Will you be angry with me? What? The female corpse at the regent's door yesterday. Will you be angry with me? Hearing this, Shin Yueji paused and looked away. Don't think too much. I'm not angry. Why aren't you angry? Shin Yueji, Imo Wushang. You suddenly appeared here to ask me if I'm angry? Whether that thing is true or not, even if there is another woman by my side, you won't care, won't you? Of course I care. Shin Yueji stops him. Seeing that the man's tense Jun Yin relaxes a little, Shin Yueji glares at him coldly. Besides me, if I find out that any other woman has an affair with you, from now on, we will go back to the bridge and return to the road. The man hugged her tightly. From the beginning to the end, there will only be you. I will not have another woman. She roughly understood the reason why the man suddenly appeared in her general's residence. So it was about Zhangsun Wuyin yesterday. Shin Yueji couldn't tell what it was like to be held in the man's arms and feel his strong heartbeat. Wasn't it good to trust him? From the incident in the regent's mansion until now, she had never doubted him. If Imo Wushang was really a lustful person, he wouldn't have rejected the eldest young miss of the Shin clan for so long when she was infatuated with him. The appearance of the eldest young lady of the Shun family was one of the best in the capital, and very few people could compare to her. Imo Wushang. Yes. Let me ask you a question. You have to answer me honestly. All right. Do you like the first empress? I like it. After a while, she heard the man's tone of certainty. Shin Yueji's hand on his clothes tightened, and her eyes gradually became cold. What about me? I'm all alone. Oh, pushing him away with all her strength, Shin Yueji looked at him lightly. You go back. I have to go in to serve the emperor. Her arm was grasped by the man, and an overwhelming kiss came down. The sensation on her neck was bone-chilling, and for a moment, it was as if countless cold air had drilled into her body. Shin Yueji instinctively slapped the man's hand away and stood up from his lap. There was a hint of panic in his expression. The man's pupils constricted hard, and the soft jade ointment was rubbed on his fingertips. Feng Juqing looked straight at her, not letting go of any panic on her face. Are you afraid of me? No, no. He rubbed his eyebrows with a little headache, and his voice was a little helpless. Imperial concubine, I lost my composure just now. I promise you, there won't be a next time. Don't be afraid of me. I won't hurt you. She let the man hold her hand and sat on his lap again. Shin Yueji looked up at him carefully. Your Majesty, what happened just now? Occasionally, when he heard them talking excitedly, he would say, when are you going to elope with the regent? Father, I heard from Double Happiness that the Prince Regent came to see you today. He saw that she did not speak, but he did not feel suffocated at all and continued to ask tirelessly. Shin Yueji finally couldn't help but look at him. Father is still an official. Now that the emperor is living in our General Fu, Is it really good for you to encourage your daughter to make him a cuckold? Shinhee chuckled. What's wrong with that? Although this old man is loyal, the emperor is an outsider after all. How can he be more important than the happiness of my precious daughter? Suddenly mentioning Feng Juqing, Shin Yueji frowned. I didn't think so before, but now I suddenly realized that sometimes the emperor doesn't seem to be himself. Jier, what do you mean? Chapter 346. Shin Yueji shook her head. Sometimes, His Majesty is so strange that I don't think he is like him. Sometimes, he is so gentle that he is like a different person. Father, you've been an official in the imperial court for many years. Although you served the late emperor, you should have some understanding of His Majesty's character. Has he ever behaved in any way that was abnormal compared to usual? These words made Shinhee hold his chin and think about it seriously. I don't know about that. When the late emperor was still alive, although the emperor was a noble prince, he was bullied by everyone and could be controlled by anyone. But even so, he was still kind to people. Even if they were his enemies, he would be happy and didn't hold any grudges. But sometimes, Shinhee frowned. Sometimes what? Shinhee recalled, I don't dare to make a conclusion on this matter. I just happened to bump into him and saw him murder the eunuchs in the palace. His cruel and ruthless bladesmanship and the chilling aura all over his body made him seem like a completely different person from before. Shinhee's words made Shin Yueji ponder. Why is it like this? How old was he when you saw him, father? Oh, he was still a child. He was at most 10 years old. It was only now that Shinhee realized how cruel and bloodthirsty he was when he was only 10 years old. Not mentioning Shin Yueji, he had been immersed in Feng Juqing's gentle appearance and seemed to have forgotten that there was such a thing. By the way, Jier, why are you asking about this? Or His Majesty? Oh, it's nothing. Shin Yueji shook her head. I heard that His Majesty brought back a master today. I asked His Majesty, but he obviously didn't want to talk to me. That's why I asked Father. I just want to know more about His Majesty from Father. She lied to Father and Mother Shun subconsciously. Hearing this, the two of them smiled. Jier, women in the harem are not allowed to interfere in politics. You'd better not interfere in His Majesty's affairs. No matter how gentle His Majesty is, he is still a ruler. We must have some limits. You can't cross them, understand? Shin Yueji smiled and nodded. Mother, I know. I'm going back to the palace tomorrow. I know what to do. General, Madam, Prime Minister Gu and Madame Morong are asking for an audience. The atmosphere in the room became strange because of this announcement. After about half a cup of tea, Mrs. Shun narrowed her eyes dangerously. What are they doing here? Shin Yueji gently raised her finger. He probably heard that the emperor came to our place, so he was dissatisfied. Humph. Mother Shin snorted coldly, then sneered. This Gu Wei's third son has just died. Instead of staying at home to prepare for his son's funeral, he actually has the time to come here and snatch the emperor's favor? Shin Yueji raised her lips and giggled. Mother, you should be glad that Gueo Chi died today. Otherwise, the people from the Gu family would have arrived long ago. Why would they delay until now to come to our residence? This Gu clan is a group of dogs. I've long since hated them. I'll go. Mother Shin pressed him down unhappily. Where are you going? Did he not know that he was terminally ill and was about to die? You'd better lie down on the bed. You're not allowed to interfere in today's matter. Jier, let's go. You and Mother will go entertain them. Shin Yueji smiled as she looked at Father Shin, who was sulking on the bed. She turned her head to look at Shuang Shi. Go and inform the emperor. Tell him that Gu Wei and his wife have come to pay their respects. Chapter 347. Main Hall. Taking off her gorgeous and graceful red dress, Morong Yun was dressed in an exceptionally simple and elegant manner today. There was no expression on her calm face, but her eyes were red and swollen, and no amount of accessories could hide the sorrow in her eyes. Sitting beside her was Prime Minister Gu Wei, who was over his middle age. Even though he was middle-aged, he was still high-spirited and vigorous. If it wasn't for the fact that his son had died today, and his face was full of sorrow. It was impossible to tell his age from looking at him. He was the young master of a wealthy family who was sought after by the daughters of the capital city's prestigious families. Apart from these two people, Shun Yueji did not expect that there would be another uninvited guest. Gu Mujue, the eldest son of the Gu family. He was talented and skilled in martial arts. What made him popular and sought after by the daughters of the capital city's prestigious families was not his outstanding appearance, but his unparalleled talent and martial arts skills. He truly lived up to the saying that he was a rare perfect person in the world. With her sharp eyes, Shin Yueji saw at a glance that under his luxurious brocade robe, there was a small piece of wood carved of a small fox pinned to his waist. It looked ugly and naive, but it was not annoying. Instead, it gave off a sense of cuteness. He was dressed in luxurious clothes from head to toe, but this unfashionable small wood-carved fox was worn on his body. To hell with it, it did not lower the man's status and outstanding appearance at all. Shin Yueji's gaze fell on the wood carved with the small fox on his waist for a long time. A strange light flashed across her eyes, and even her hands under her long sleeves clenched slightly for a moment. This little fox was carved by her while she was crying and holding back her tears when she was bullied in her residence. After she finished carving it, she threw it away because it looked too ugly and she had vented her emotions. After so many years, although it was just something that she threw away casually, it was still something that she had carved herself. Every detail on it was carved with great care. Shin Yueji did not expect that Gu Mujue would actually wear it on his body. Her gaze slowly moved from the wood carved with the small fox to the man's face. Under the man's handsome eyes, there was a pair of eyes that were even more beautiful than the morning dew. The moment their eyes met, the man averted his gaze. The coldness that flashed across his eyes was so fast that it was difficult to capture it, and his hand under the wide sleeves of his robe, almost out of habit, or perhaps out of subconsciousness, was stroking the little fox carved in wood on his waist. His fair and slender fingers gently stroked it, as if it was lingering with endless longing and lingering. Even the coldness in his eyes became much gentler when he touched the small fox carving. There was no coldness in his eyes anymore. At this moment, Shin Yueji couldn't tell what she was feeling. She didn't have much interaction with Gu Mujue. As the eldest young master of the Gu residence, he had been valued by Gu Wei and Morong Yun since he was young. He had a lot of things to do, and it was almost impossible for them to meet in a month. Occasionally, it would take 3 to 4 months before they could meet. She didn't interact much with him. She just looked at him from afar and ran away. In her impression, her eldest brother had never looked at her in the eye. Even when she was punished by Morong Yun and was punished with a cane, he only watched from the side. He looked at her coldly. When she was pressed down on a chair and everyone left, he was the only one who stood at a distance and watched her being beaten. He didn't say a word and his eyes were cold as usual. In the beginning, Shin Yueji still remembered that she had begged him. Chapter 348. And he, on the other hand, turned a blind eye to her begging for mercy, turned a blind eye to her cries, and continued to coldly watch from the side. After a long time, Shin Yueji had some expectations in the beginning, but in the end, even if he was watching from the side, she would never beg him and call him big brother. Thinking of this, Shin Yueji's eyes were full of mockery. The people of the Gu family were all cruel and unscrupulous. They were close to each other, and she, from the beginning to the end, was just an outsider. Oh, did the sun rise from the west today? What a rare visitor. I didn't expect Prime Minister Gu and Lady Morong to personally pay a visit to the general's mansion. Young Master Gu, the three of you coming together really brings light to the general's mansion today. I thought I was dreaming. Come, quickly pinch Mother to see if Mother is dreaming. Shinshio covered her mouth with a handkerchief and smiled like an old mother in a brothel who had guests. Shin Yueji helped her to the main seat and sat down beside her. Her cold eyes swept over the faces of the three people. Finally, it fixed on Morong Yun. Lady Morong, is it because you know that the emperor is staying in the general's fu and is not happy? Her words were so straightforward, without the slightest bit of politeness. Morong Yun was obviously too lazy to be polite with her. Since the emperor has left the palace, he should be received by the Gu family. Imperial concubine Shan has just returned to the Fu and must have a lot of things to say to Lady Shan. I'm afraid that the emperor will not feel at ease staying here. What does Lady Shan think? Lady Morong's words are too unreasonable. To think that you are an aristocratic family, how can you not even understand these rules? The emperor is the monarch, and we are the subjects. Where the emperor wants to go, or where he wants to stay, that is the emperor's own business. As a subject, can we take a knife to the emperor's neck and force him to stay at your place? Shin Yueji faintly smiled and covered her lips with a handkerchief. Bin Gong just doesn't understand. His Majesty will stay at my General Fu for at most one night. He must be tired after traveling for a few days and will leave tomorrow morning. You say, His Majesty rushed to our door to ask for people. I really don't know the reason why His Majesty went to your place. Don't tell me that you're still worried that our Shun family will speak ill of your Gu family in His Majesty's ears? Imperial Consort Shun, Gu Wei rebuked. If it was before, perhaps Shun Yueji would still be afraid of him. What she was most afraid of was his fake, dignified face. Looking at her eyes, it was as if he wanted to cut her into 1,000 pieces. In his eyes, not to mention acknowledging her as his daughter, even looking at her was a form of humiliation to him. But now, the man reprimanded. Shen Yueji was unmoved. On the contrary, her slender fingers lightly tapped on the table. Prime Minister Gu, Bin Gong's ears are not deaf. Not like you, old and need to speak loudly. You came to the general's mansion to ask His Majesty. Whether or not you can persuade him, His Majesty has the final say. But there is one thing that Bin Gong needs to make clear to you. This general's mansion is my Shin family's territory. In the capital, your Gu family is not much higher than my Shin family. Since you're in someone else's territory, don't put on your Gu family's airs. This will not only be disrespectful to the owner, it will also lower your status and cultivation. What does Lady Morong think? You. Madame Morong, please don't take it personally. What I mean is, it's better if you have fewer children, one boy and one girl. It's just right. It'll be just right. If you give birth to too many children, they'll cause trouble here and run around there. If they're not careful, they might get beaten to death. As a mother, you've raised them for nothing for the past 20 years. Suddenly, they're gone before you can even take care of them in their old age. Don't you feel bad? Pong. The teacup was heavily thrown to the ground. Shinshio tactfully closed her mouth. Chapter 351. I don't know which inn in the capital can offer more money than the Phoenix Brothel. The waiters of the Phoenix Brothel are all proud and arrogant. If they offer less money, they might not even be interested. Prime Minister said that not only will they have a hard time making ends meet in the future, I'm afraid that they might not even be able to survive in the future. Shin Yueji held her chin and looked distressed. Prime Minister Gu is deeply loved by the people in the capital. For the sake of his own son, he has implicated so many innocent people. When the time comes, the people will gossip. When that time comes, she spread her hands and said helplessly, the image that the Gu family has built up to love the people will be in vain and will collapse. What did you say? Although Shin Yueji's words were unpleasant to the ears, it was indeed reasonable. Gu Wei, in particular, stood up on the spot. In the meantime, he saw Morong Yun's cold gaze and quickly sat back down. Even the way she looked at Morong Yun was filled with fear. Yun, I didn't know things would turn out like this. At that time, I was only thinking about avenging Mingqi and finding the murderer. It wasn't true. Morong Yun's eyes were filled with fear. Morong Yun didn't look at him, but she didn't hide the disgust in her eyes. Whether it was for Chi or for your own selfish motives, you know it yourself. There's no need to explain it to me. Yun, it's been so many years, don't you believe me? Sigh. Seeing that the two of them were quarreling, Shin Yueji interrupted them. Madame Morong, please don't pick our general's mansion to quarrel with you two. My father and mother love each other very much. Don't pass this on to my father and mother, or you will suffer retribution. Shun Yueji, seeing that you are the imperial concubine, I won't lower myself to your level. But you must remember your own status. You are just the imperial concubine. If the Gu family is not willing, then you won't be an imperial concubine for long. Shinshio, with her hot temper, immediately stood up when she heard this. She almost cursed it out loud. She, Shinshio, and Shan He were not dead yet. How could Gu Wei step on her head, even if they were dead? Just based on the troops that her Shun family had secretly cultivated, it was enough for Shun Yueji to sit firmly in the position of an imperial consort and not be shaken for 100 years. Even the emperor could not. Shinshio didn't even have time to retort. Then, she heard a gentle male voice. Amidst the gentleness, there was a dignified pressure that could not be refused. Oh, we still don't know that without our verbal orders, the position of the imperial consort can be abolished by an official? Feng Juqing's voice came from outside the door. He was dressed in a scholarly white robe that made him look as handsome as a clear river. His facial features were so natural that it was impossible to look away from him. Especially that pair of gentle and affectionate eyes. At this moment, no emotions could be seen in them, whether they were angry or calm. The depths of the darkness were so deep that no one could understand what they were looking at. When Gu Wei saw him, he was startled. He immediately got up and saluted. This subject Gu Wei greets the emperor. Long live the emperor. Murong Yun and Gu Mujue bowed as well. When Shinshio saw this, she naturally did not dare to stand still with Shun Yueji. Just as Shun Yueji was about to bend over and kneel down, the man's strong and large hands firmly caught her hand. He took the opportunity to pull her towards the high seat and let her sit on his lap. Chapter 352. Shinshio tactfully got up from the ground and went to the guest seat below to sit down. The moment he raised his head, he saw Shin Yueji in the arms of the young emperor. Gu Wei coldly narrowed his eyes. I heard that your majesty returned to the capital today, so this official specially rushed over to invite your majesty. Beloved official Gu. Your majesty? He casually took a piece of pastry from the tea table and teased the little person in his arms. When she opened her mouth to bite, Feng Juqing took back the pastry. After a few times, the little woman angrily turned her face away, and he took a full piece of pastry and pushed it into her mouth. He only stuffed her cheeks full and glared at him with big eyes. Feng Juqing couldn't help but laugh when he saw how she was angry but didn't dare to vent. He couldn't help but reach out and poke her puffed-up cheeks. His tone was gentle and gentle. Do I need to report to my beloved official where I want to stay? Your Majesty? Jean was resting just now when I heard that Prime Minister Gu brought Madame Murong to the general's residence in a grandiose manner. At this point, he smiled, not knowing whether it was funny or a sneer. His gentle laughter inexplicably made one feel a chill down one's spine, revealing a cold intent from top to bottom. Gu Wei knew that he was in the wrong, so he respectfully got up and kneeled on the ground. This official is worried that your majesty will not stay in the general's residence well. Your majesty knows that General Shun is after all a military general, and it is inevitable that there will be some mistakes in terms of accommodation. Your majesty is the son of heaven and needs to think of everything thoroughly and be well prepared. This official is afraid that General Shun will treat your majesty poorly, so I heard that old General Shun is seriously ill and worried about your majesty's health. So this official wife came with Prime Minister Gu to invite your majesty to the Prime Minister's residence. To put it bluntly, Prime Minister Gu and Madame Murong are looking down on my father because he is an uncouth man. I admit that my father is not that meticulous, but it is not like there are no women in the general's residence. My mother is meticulous, right? Are the maids in the residence also meticulous? Ben Gong is not much different. Your majesty will stay in the general's residence for a day. Could it be that Madame Murong is worried that your majesty will lose weight in one night? That's right. Shinshio snorted in dissatisfaction. We can't even bear to eat the big pig trotters cooked by the kitchen on normal days. They are specially given to the emperor. Feng Juqing, who was drinking tea, was caught off guard by Shinshio's words. He nearly spat out the tea. Seeing this, Shin Yueji quickly patted his back and stared at Shinshio. Mother, look at you. Don't talk about the big pig trotters every time you see a guest. What kind of identity does the emperor have? What haven't I seen before? Just a glance at this big fish and meat is enough for me in the palace. And your words? Shin Yueji wanted to say that but because Murong Yun and Gu Wei were present, wouldn't saying it be a slap to Shinshio's face? Now that they were a family, she didn't want to make them happy. It's fine if you talk to Madame Murong and the others, but don't talk nonsense in front of His Majesty. Right, Your Majesty? Feng Juqing looked at her helplessly. His slender fingers touched the tip of her eyebrows lightly. He covered his mouth and coughed lightly. All right, I heard that third young Master Gu was assassinated in Phoenix Restaurant. Now that the Prime Minister's residence is searching for the murderer in the whole city, I will not go to your place. I will stay in the General's residence for a day and return tomorrow. Your Majesty, Gu Wei still wanted to say something. During that time, Murong Yun glanced at him. He could only swallow all the words that were on the tip of his tongue unwillingly. Since it is Your Majesty's wish, I will go back first. I've always repeatedly persuaded myself in my heart that there's still a long time. There's still a long time. One day, you'll be moved, and one day, you'll run into my arms again. But Yun I've waited for more than 20 years, and we've already had 3 children. Tell me, what else do you want from me? I treat you wholeheartedly, but do I have any place in your heart? Chapter 354. I want to? You're the one who doesn't want to. You're so considerate and magnanimous. Countless beauties are sent to my room. Do you think that with them, I won't be with you? That I won't touch you if I forget you? Gu Wei suddenly laughed. My wife, from the moment we married, she was so considerate. She was gentle, magnanimous, educated and reasonable, and worked hard to help the Gu family grow. Gu Wei laughed until tears came out of his eyes. He didn't get on the carriage but staggered forward alone. It's been so many years have passed, but in your heart, I'm still nothing. All along, I've been the evil person who forced you to have a child prematurely, the one who prevented you from being able to spend the rest of your life with the man you love. After 3 steps, Gu Wei stopped. He did not turn back to look at her, but his back was inexplicably dispirited. Yun tell me, if it wasn't for that night, if you weren't pregnant with Gu Yueqin, no matter what that man did, you'd forgive him and be with him? Really? Yes. There was no consideration. Murong Yun looked at his back and said resolutely, even if he had forgotten me, even if he had broken his promise to me, I would still choose to forgive him, because I love him. What about me? From the beginning to the end, I only had you in my heart. I married you cleanly and never had another woman? Even so, you've never loved me, right? Gu Wei, do you understand love? Ha ha ha, I don't understand love. I've loved you for more than 20 years without asking for anything in return. I've been wholeheartedly for you, and you say that I don't understand love? Gu Wei threw his head back and laughed, then strode away. He doesn't understand love? The woman he loved actually said that he didn't understand love. Then, who was the sacrifice he had made for these 20 years? Wasn't it love? If it wasn't love, Gu Wei's heart strangely throbbed with pain. He closed his eyes, but after a few steps, his vision suddenly went black and he fainted. Father! Murong Yun calmly looked at his fainted body on the ground. In that instant, he seemed to have aged several decades. She didn't step forward to help him up. There wasn't the slightest hint of heartache or worry in her eyes. As she watched Gu Mujue help him into the carriage, she pursed her lips and smiled silently. If not for that night 20 years ago, even if that night had happened 20 years ago, if she hadn't been pregnant with Gu Yueqin, she would still have followed that man without hesitation. But if it wasn't for her, if it wasn't for her, if it wasn't for her, 2 streams of tears flowed down her pale cheeks. Almost 20 years of abuse could not erase the hatred in her heart. She did not deserve to live in this world. She was unnecessary. Every time she saw her, she wanted to strangle her with her own hands. It was all because of her that she could not be with the man she loved. That was why she had married Gu Wei, a man she did not love. Mother, what you said to father today was too harsh. After comforting Gu Wei, Gu Mujue got out of the carriage and looked at her with disapproval. Murong Yun only closed her eyes. Her face, which did not have any makeup on, did not age much because of the changes over the years. She exuded an aura of purity that was as pure as the heavens. She walked past him and said, "You go back first, I'll walk back." After your majesty eats, you can have a good night's sleep and return to the capital tomorrow. Feng Juqing nodded and didn't say anything else. He watched as Shun Yueji got up from his embrace and left. Her slender figure disappeared around the corner. A pair of gentle and smiling eyes suddenly turned cold. His black pupils were dyed red, and his pitch-black pupils were no longer the same color as before. They were bright red, as if they were covered in a layer of fresh blood. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the hand he had used to touch the woman's cheek. It wasn't until the skin on his hand was scraped that his eyes, which were so red that they looked like they were about to burst into blood, slowly returned to their original state. Opening his eyes once more, Feng Juqing lowered his head to look at his torn palm and fingertips, which were bleeding profusely. He frowned slightly. Even though she had long been moved by him, Feng Juqing's sudden act of deep emotions only made her even more determined. Thinking of this, a chill emanated from the bottom of her heart, almost penetrating her limbs and bones. The last bit of affection he had for Feng Juqing had been extinguished by Ji Chu's words. It turned out that he had never been willing to die for her. This was all part of his plan all along. His purpose was so obvious. It was to make her more loyal to him, so that he could use her better. And she still foolishly thought that this man was willing to sacrifice his own life for her. Kong Yin smiled as he shook his head. This Lao Na and Guifei are now grasshoppers on the same side. If Guifei is worried that this Lao Na will go to His Majesty to inform on you, there is no need. His Majesty knows that your Shin family has a high position and power, thus he would know about Guifei's thoughts and would not change a thing on the surface. But this old monk is different. Guifei only needs to say a few bad things about this old monk in front of His Majesty. According to His Majesty's thoughts, this old monk will definitely not live past the second day. Sigh. Chapter 358. There's no need to feel uneasy, Your Highness. You only need to remember that you and I are merely taking what we need. You get what you want, and I also get what I want. There's still a long way to go. If you really want to rely on me, I can promise you that you won't have to worry about being an official anymore. As long as you can help the people, you can stay as an official in the Phone Kingdom as long as you want, until the day you get tired of it. What do you think? Kong Yin had been waiting for her to say this. He bowed to Shin Yueji respectfully. I'm willing to do my best for your highness, until the day I die. Shun Yueji glanced at him indifferently. There are indeed many people who need to die in this world, but they are all people who deserve to die. People like us need to live, and live to the end. Yes, your highness is right. Does Master Kong Yi know martial arts? I'm well versed in both literature and martial arts. If your highness needs me, I can. If he said he was well versed in both literature and martial arts, he must be good at everything. Such a promising talent had been suppressed by Gu Wei for so many years. At this moment, Shin Yueji really wanted to laugh. Does the Emperor know that you know martial arts? I have a backup plan for myself. The Emperor only knows about my talent, but he doesn't know that I know martial arts. Master Kong Yin is indeed astute. Did you leave a backup plan for yourself? Hearing this, Kong Yin suddenly smiled. This old monk is many years older than your majesty. No matter how good your majesty is at scheming, This old monk is not a soft persimmon that can be pinched by anyone. There are some things that I have experienced, so I will naturally be on guard. That's good. I'll need you on the way back to the capital tomorrow. Master already knows about the broken heart cliff. I need your help tomorrow. Although Shin Yueji didn't say how she wanted him to help, with Kong Yin's intelligence, how could he not guess what she wanted him to do? He bowed respectfully. Yes. When she returned to the room, the man was still sitting on the soft couch, but there was a book in his hand. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he did not even raise his head. When Jean was in the palace, Jean had heard of Guifei's name many times. I did not expect Guifei to be a person who loves to read. When she was alive, Shun Yueji was not willing to study. These books were found for her by the Double Happiness sisters when she had nothing to do. Shin Yueji didn't know if it was because she hated reading. Shin Yueji found that many of the words she knew in the past were now unfamiliar to her. She took the book to ask Shun He about the words she didn't recognize. However, he stuttered and refused to tell her. Shin Yueji secretly touched her forehead. This Chia wants to know a few more words. This way, when I stand with His Majesty, my words won't be so vulgar. When the time comes, people will laugh at me, and I will lose face for His Majesty. She saw Feng Juqing waving to her. Shin Yueji walked over obediently. The man showed her the countless small circles in the book. Are these all words that Guifei doesn't recognize? Shin Yueji blinked. There were at least 10 words on the page that she didn't recognize, and the number of words on the page did not exceed 100. Shin Yueji scratched her head awkwardly. Emperor, is this Chia too stupid? Since ancient times, which woman who entered the court as a concubine didn't have a lot of writing skills? The current Feng country had long passed the era where a woman's lack of talent was a virtue. Chapter 359. He put the book aside and looked up at her. Since you don't like it, you don't have to force yourself to learn it. It's getting late, and you have to get up early to go back to the palace tomorrow. Go to bed early. Oh. Shun Yueji shrugged her head. She saw the man stand up and open his arms to him. She stepped forward and helped him undress. The man was wearing a luxurious purple gold robe. The loose robe made him look a little thin. His handsome facial features and gentle temperament, coupled with the loose robe, made the man inexplicably more dignified. After taking off the man's robe, Shin Yueji hesitantly looked at his clothes inside. The man's smooth chest was as white as a painting. It was very beautiful. She used to be most moved by the man's perfect body. She would only like it if she loved it. Now she looked at it indifferently. She even subconsciously compared him with Mo Wushang. Compared to this, it's like hell. She was selfish and partial to that man. She had completely felt that the man in front of her was not comparable to him. Shin Yueji's mind was filled with thoughts of that man until her chin was lifted, and she met the man's dark eyes. His warm lips curved into a smile. The man watched her blushing cheeks. What are you thinking about, Imperial Consort? Shin Yueji took a deep breath and blushed. She turned her back and said, Your Majesty, don't take off too much. Didn't you say that tomorrow morning? If you take it off, it will be very troublesome to wear clothes tomorrow. The man stared at her red ears and was slightly stunned. Then he chuckled, walked to the bed and sat down. But before he sat on the bed, he suddenly narrowed his brows and stood up. Shin Yueji sensed such a huge commotion. She turned around and saw that the neatly folded bed had suddenly slithered out from under the blanket. It was as long as 2 people and as thick as an arm. Its black and yellow head was shaking its head and spitting out its tongue. Shin Yueji was shocked. Perhaps seeing the girl's pale face, Feng Juqing came over and held her in his arms. With a wave of his hand, the big snake on the bed fell to the ground. The man's face didn't look good. He squinted at the long sword hanging on the wall and was about to take it. Shin Yueji recognized the yellow snake as the one she had seen in Shan Yueji's backyard. Although there were many snakes like this in Shen Yueji's backyard, the one that was staring at her with glowing eyes was definitely the one that had rushed out when she opened the door. She hid behind the man and winked at the big yellow snake. The big yellow snake didn't know whether it understood or not. It stuck out its tongue at her and then slipped under the table. Under her gaze, it pushed the door with its head and crawled out. The big fat snake climbed on the ground as fast as a gust of wind. The corner of Shun Yueji's mouth twitched as she buried her head in the man's arms. It's said that if you plant flowers and plants at home in this season, it's the easiest to attract these legless things. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have asked my father to plant so many flowers and plants in the backyard. I don't know how it broke in. Shin Yueji looked at the bed with lingering fear when she recalled the big yellow snake hiding on the bed just now. Your Majesty, I'm afraid. I don't dare to go to bed anymore. Chapter 360. Feng Juqing ordered someone to come in and change the bedding. Before Shuang, she went out with the quilt in his arms. He stared at Shun Yueji mysteriously for a while. Sure enough, after the servant left, a big white snake came out of nowhere from the newly changed bedding. Shin Yueji didn't dare to sit on the bed because of the big yellow snake from before. Now, a white snake popped out from the changed bedding. In terms of size, it seemed to be 2 or 3 times bigger than the big yellow snake from before. And this snake looked huge, but it was not stupid at all, especially when it stared at her. It even winked at her shyly. The young emperor looked embarrassed. This time, without Shun Yueji's wink, the big white snake still knew when to stop. It jumped down from the bed, opened the door, and crawled out. Shin Yueji trembled with fear. Your Majesty, didn't you just change the bedding? Why is there a snake? She stepped out and was about to go out. I'd better ask Father to prepare another room. I'm scared. I want to sleep with Mother. Usually, if a woman was afraid of something, she would subconsciously think of her mother. Feng Juqing couldn't bear to see her helpless, scared, and pretending to be strong. He patted the back of her hand. I ordered Ji Chu to scatter some things in the room to repel the snake. When I was sleeping at night, I vaguely heard something moving here. I was in a daze and thought I heard it wrong. I didn't expect it to be a snake. Shin Yueji sobbed in the emperor's arms. Did I spend a few nights with these 2 snakes before this? Thinking of this, Shin Yueji had a lingering fear, and tears of grievance hung on her face. The emperor gently wiped away the tears in the corner of her eyes. It's the season now. Flowers and trees are indeed easy to attract snakes. Don't be afraid. 2 big snakes came out of the room in succession. Shun He also knew the situation here, and immediately ordered the servants to change their room. Shin Yueji was the emperor's favorite concubine in name. No matter which room she changed, she had to sleep with the emperor. How could she leave so easily? Fortunately, when Feng Juqing saw the girl's delicate face, he specially asked Shan Yueji to stay with Shin Xiu, and when he left tomorrow, he would ask someone to call her. Lying on Shan Xiu's bed, Shan He was driven to the side and made a mattress. Shin Xiu lovingly hugged her daughter. At least your eldest brother has some brains. I already said that if he drove all the spiders, flies, and snakes in his backyard into your room, wouldn't he be charged with murder by the emperor? The emperor is not a fool. This thing should be done in moderation. It's hard to guarantee that he won't be suspicious. Father Shun and Mother Shun echoed each other. After talking for a long time, they realized that the original owner of the body was lying on the bed without saying a word. Shin He got up from the ground, a little worried. He walked to the edge of the bed and touched Shan Yueji's head. Daughter, are you scared? Father and Mother have seen Little White and Little Yellow with their own eyes. They have been trained by your big brother to understand human nature. When you were in the palace, they went on a hunger strike with your big brother. They almost starved to death because they missed you. Xiao Xin Xiao Shun and Xiao Qin's father and said. Chapter 361. Mother Shin glared at him angrily and slapped his hand. Damn old thing. What are you talking about? Shin Yueji opened her eyes and looked at Mother Shin's kind face. Mother, do you trust me? Jeer, what are you talking about? You are my daughter. If I don't trust you, who else should I trust? She frowned. What's wrong? Jeer, you haven't said a word since you came out of your room. Did something happen? No. Shin Yueji shook her head and sat up. I just feel that it won't be too peaceful when we return to the capital tomorrow. Although His Majesty is traveling incognito, he has brought many secret guards with him. If Ji-er is still worried, the general's mansion will also send more people to protect you back to the capital. Looking back at her parents' faces, Shin Yueji smiled. I want to take a risk tomorrow. No. Shunhee rejected sternly and held her hand. You can't do anything risky. Even if someone wants to do something, it should be His Majesty. Ji-er is a woman, and a woman should stay in the boudoir. Even if she gets married, she should be protected by her husband. Shin Yueji knew that it was useless to tell them her plan. She just wanted to remind them. She lay on the bed again. Father, mother, I miss Mo Wushang a little. Shinhee lay on the mattress. Now that you mention it, I miss my son-in-law a little too. Ji-er, for the sake of this future son-in-law, I have been very quiet. I have chased away all the young masters that I had reserved. I even want to separate His Majesty. Yes, Ji-er, you and His Majesty haven't slept together yet, right? Faced with such straightforward words, Shin Yueji sat up and stared at Shin Xiu for a long time. Mother, you? Mother heard from eunuch Gao that His Majesty had also stayed in your Phoenix Palace for a few days during the month that I've been in the palace. Ji-er, you and His Majesty haven't. Shin Yueji held her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. No. Although His Majesty stayed with me in the same palace, he always went to review the memorials at night. Moreover, he would read them until dawn. He had already left for morning court before I woke up. Shin Xiu stroked her chest. That's good. My daughter is still innocent. Mother can see that the Prince Regent is infatuated with you. Ji-er, don't act recklessly. It's better to treat the Prince Regent better. A person like the Emperor is not suitable for you. Mother feels upset just by looking at him. Your mother is right. Ji-er, you can have many husbands, but your man can't. He must be devoted to you. When the time comes, you will accept the Prince Regent. Father will make a backyard for you. If any man is disobedient, you can divorce him. If he's obedient, you can give him a promotion and let him help you take care of your backyard. You can enjoy yourself outside as much as you want. The corner of Shun Yueji's mouth twitched. According to the Prince Regent's character, Father, are you sure he won't kill those men? Shinhee scratched his head and thought seriously for a while. That's true. It seems like I can only raise them secretly. As the saying goes, the flower in the house is not as wild as the hiss. Madam Shin threw a pillow at him. Shunhee immediately covered his head and lay on the ground, gasping. Shunhee, tell me clearly today. What do you mean by the flower in the house is not as fragrant as the wildflower? So you've been keeping other women outside, haven't you? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.